The story begins with the commander pointing at the screen, identifying a woman as Snow White and stating that she is their target. Our protagonist, Kim Seok, raises his hand and questions why she is called Snow White, noting that the name is typically associated with a Caucasian figure, whereas this woman appears to be a typical Asian. He also remarks that the name Snow White seems too weak for someone considered a threat. The commander, now addressing Kim Seok as the team leader, warns him not to judge based on race or gender. He emphasizes that Snow White is an extremely dangerous woman. The commander then provides further context, revealing that the target's real name is Anna Nanayama, also known as Snow White, the leader of the Yakuza. She earned the alias because she is the primary supplier of a potent drug known as pure Coca-Cola, hence the name Snow White. The commander informs the team that the target is scheduled to host a drug party at a hotel with minimal security after meeting with representatives from both domestic and international criminal organizations. This event presents a crucial opportunity to eliminate Snow White and prevent the further spread of illegal drugs domestically. The commander adds that the operation will be disguised as an internal conflict within the organization, meaning firearms are not permitted. The director, concerned, asks if the mission seems too rough, but the commander reassures him that this is why their top agent has been assigned to it, stating his trust in the team leader. The team leader confidently replies, "Leave it to me." Later, as Kim Seok exits the elevator where the drug party is taking place, he surveys the gathering of Yakuza members. One of the men notices him and yells, demanding to know what he's doing there. Ignoring the man's protests, Seok calmly alerts his team, Alpha entering, before drawing his knife. Moving with incredible speed, he charges at the men. One attacker hurls a knife at him, but Seok deflects it with his own, forcefully knocking the man's knife aside and slashing his neck. As the man grasps his throat in agony and begins to fall, another opponent rushes in to attack, but Seok easily dispatches him as well, swiftly taking down all the guards in the hallway. Earlier, the commander had informed the team that there would be approximately 10 non-combatants and over 20 combatants. When asked how many agents would be needed for the operation, the Seok specified 3, including him. The commander questioned if 3 agents were excessive, but Seok explained that with 3 exits to cover, it was necessary, adding that this was an extermination mission. Seok, confident in his team's abilities, believed that no matter how many Yakuza were present, none could stand against his brothers. As one of Seok's brothers at the second entrance commented on how easy the mission seemed, Seok reminded him to stay focused on the task. The brother acknowledged the command, and they continued their mission. They were NIS Black agents, elite survivors forged in hell. A moment later, all the field team members approached the main target. Seok informed his brothers that their enemies would be under the influence of drugs and that there was now only one exit. He then ordered them to block the exit and eliminate everyone inside. Grabbing the door handle, he opened it, drawing the attention of Snow White, who was in the midst of kissing a lady. The team waited outside, but when the door opened, they were shocked to see that everyone inside had already been killed. He quickly ordered his brothers to find the target and secure the entrance by locking the door. However, before they could react, the door slammed shut, plunging the room into darkness. Panic set in as they anxiously asked who was at the door. Suddenly, the chandelier lit up, temporarily blinding them. Snow White's voice cut through the confusion as she taunted them, announcing that the entrance was closed and the door locked. They were all stunned to see Snow White now bearing sharp fangs. She asked, with a cruel smile, what they planned to do next. Holding a woman's severed head, she mockingly questioned whether she should kill them all, leaving Seok to wonder if he and his brothers, who once believed themselves invincible, were now facing their deaths. Snow White then called out to one of his brothers and tossed the woman's head to him. The man caught it in surprise, but before he could react, something like a bullet pierced through the head and then through his neck, sending him flying across the room and slamming him onto the floor, dead. Filled with rage, another brother charged at Snow White. Seok tried to stop him, knowing their opponent was far from ordinary, but it was too late. His brother's head now had a hole in it, leaving him stunned. Snow White smiled at his reaction, taunting him, saying that no matter how many insects gathered, they were still just insects, and sarcastically asked what he thought he could do. Enraged, he grabbed his knife and rushed at Snow White, fully aware that he needed to think calmly because this entity was beyond his capability, but retreat was not an option. As he lunged, Snow White flicked something at him, and he was startled to see that it was a tooth. Luckily, he tilted his head just in time to dodge it. She smirked, playing with more teeth before flicking them at him one by one. He managed to dodge them all, then leaped toward her, aiming his knife at her head, confident that he had her. But just as he was about to declare her dead, she grabbed his face, dragged him backward to gain momentum, and then hurled him across the room, slamming him hard against the wall. He realized it was impossible to defeat her and wondered what kind of power she possessed. Suddenly, she appeared above him with incredible speed, landing on his legs, crushing them. He screamed in pain, but she only smiled, telling him how much she liked him. As she stabbed one of his hands, she taunted him, saying she wanted him to make things even more exciting and fun. Trembling in agony, he struggled to understand what she meant by fun. Gritting his teeth in anger, he asked her if killing for fun was what she considered entertainment. He then shouted, demanding if that was what she truly found enjoyable. In a desperate move, he bit into her neck, tearing out a chunk of flesh. Grabbing a shard of broken glass nearby, he stabbed it into the wound he had just made. She looked at her neck in shock and fell, collapsing onto his shoulder as she tried to stand. He thought he had finally killed her, believing his revenge was complete. Glancing at his dead brothers, he lamented that he had survived alone and apologized to them, vowing to join them soon. But then, to his horror, she sat back up on top of him, causing him to cough up blood as she pressed down harder on him. With a twisted smile, she praised his unpredictability. Pulling the glass shard from her neck, she commented on how impressive it was that a human had managed to bite her. He watched in terror as the wound on her neck healed rapidly, and he shakily asked what the hell she was. The pain became unbearable, and he screamed as she coldly told him not to bother trying to understand. It was pointless. She added that he was the first human she had met who was like this, all while he continued to bleed and scream in agony. Finally, she removed the knife from his hand, causing him to clench his teeth in excruciating pain, feeling something awful tearing through his body. Eventually, he stopped moving and died, to which she scoffed, calling him pathetic. Suddenly, Yakuza members barged in, asking if Snow White was alright. She glared at them and struck one of the men dead, silencing the others with horror and fear. She then ordered them to clear the bodies and announced that they would be returning to Japan, to which they all replied with a nervous yes. A moment later, his body was dumped in a large container, presumed dead. But then, to everyone's shock, he stood up. He remembered hearing that death's form evaluates life and wondered if that was what was happening. The Yakuza members, terrified and confused, asked what was going on. One man, smoking a cigarette, approached to get a closer look, while another assured him that the man was definitely dead. The smoking man, puzzled, asked if it was rigor mortis or something, noting that he had never seen a dead body stand up and wondering what kind of grudge could make this happen. He joked that maybe the man just refused to die. The smoker then put out his cigarette on Sohyok's neck, telling his colleague they should hurry up and bury him so he could rest in peace, laughing as he did so. However, to their shock, the burn mark healed instantly, leaving the smoking man stunned. The supposedly dead man moved, his eyes now glowing red, as he thought to himself that he would receive the evaluation of his death only after he had avenged himself on that bitch, Snow White. He suddenly found himself back at the moment when he reminded his brothers that their enemies were all under the influence of drugs and that there was only one exit. He ordered them to block the exit and kill everyone inside, but confusion set in when no one responded. Just as he was about to turn around, hands reached out from behind, covering his mouth and dragging him backward. Snow White then wrapped her arms around his body, telling him he had been too successful and welcoming him while he struggled to escape. Smiling, she whispered that he was the day walker. He jolted awake, finding himself under the bright sun in the middle of the ocean. He sat up, clutching his aching head, and wondered aloud what was happening. To his shock, he saw countless dead bodies around him, leaving him bewildered about what had transpired. Suddenly, someone called out to him, introducing themselves as an agent from headquarters and instructing him to come with them. Reluctantly, he complied, and moments later, they were on the road. As they drove, he asked what had happened on the ship, but the agents only replied that they were investigating it as well. They mentioned that he had completed his mission and then inquired if he was tired. He assured them he was fine, but one of the men suggested he get some rest during the journey since the travel time was long. As the man looked at him, he noticed the agent was wearing a gas mask, which shocked him. Before he could react, the car filled with smoke, suffocating him. He tried to ask what they were doing, but the men remained silent, continuing to drive as he quickly lost consciousness. The passenger then pulled out his phone and reported to the director that they had secured the specimen. The director, who had ordered Snow White's elimination, praised the men for their good work. He then instructed them to transport the specimen to the laboratory, where they would begin the dissection immediately. After hanging up, the director stood on his desk, shaking with excitement, and shouted that he had finally obtained what he wanted, thinking eagerly of Snow White. A moment later, the car arrived at the laboratory, and the director rushed outside, calling for the researchers to gather around. As the researchers approached, the director ordered them to move quickly as there were many experiments to conduct. But when one of the researchers opened the trunk, he screamed in horror at the sight of the two agents lying dead inside. The researcher stumbled backward, terrified, as he heard movement inside the car. Before he could react, a shot rang out and he was killed instantly. Suddenly, a barrage of bullets erupted from inside the car, hitting every researcher and agent nearby. The director, paralyzed with fear, watched in shock as the parking lot became a scene of carnage, bodies strewn everywhere. He stared in disbelief, wondering how in the world this could have happened. He emerged from the car, and when the director saw him, he was paralyzed with fear before turning and fleeing at full speed. Panicked, the director called all units, ordering them to eliminate him. Calmly, he reloaded his gun. As the agents rushed toward him, one tried to stab him, but he blocked the attacker's hand and shot him in the head. Methodically, he took down each agent, shooting them in the head as they came at him. When one agent managed to get close from the side, he dodged the attack, grabbed the man's knife hand, and shot him in the arm, forcing him to drop the knife. Without hesitation, he shot the man in the head. Immediately afterward, he turned to face more agents rushing at him. He dodged another slash, grabbed the attacker's sleeve, and shot another agent in the head while dragging the agent to his back. The agent was slammed into the car, and before he could get up, he was stabbed in the neck with his own knife. But then, he heard the click of a reloading gun behind him and was shot in the head. The higher-ranking agent reported that they had subdued him and ordered his men to check the body. As he lay on the ground, eyes open and bleeding, he remained alert, hearing the agents cautiously approaching. From under the car, he aimed and shot the two agents who came near. The higher agent aimed his gun at him, shocked, and asked why he wasn't dead, how he could still be moving after being shot in the head. In a flash, he appeared in front of the man, slapping the gun out of his hand. Grabbing the agent's arm, he dragged him closer, using him as a shield while the agent begged for mercy. His fury was palpable as he glared at the director, who was still running away, desperately calling for help. Earlier, he had discovered the betrayal. After killing the two agents who had reported back to headquarters, he had found their mission papers and realized that he and his team had been sacrificed for the director's personal gain. Now, as the director looked back, he saw the seething anger in his eyes. Without a word, he slashed the agent's throat with his sharp nails, leaving the director horrified. Slowly, he advanced toward the director, swearing through gritted teeth that he would show him just how vicious the dog he had abandoned could be. He began to think that he must have died twice, maybe even 3 times, but he had no idea what was happening to his body. The only thing he was certain of was that, as an agent, his job was to gather information and eliminate enemies. The director, now terrified and stuttering, begged him to calm down, promising to explain everything, insisting there were circumstances that needed to be understood. He aimed his gun at the director, who desperately offered to help him with his next promotion, pleading for him to calm down. Without hesitation, he shot the director in the leg, causing him to scream in pain. Despite the agony, the director managed to shout for him to wait a moment and listen. Ignoring the pleas, he ordered the director to shut up and answer his questions. He demanded to know what the director had done to him. The director, still writhing on the ground, insisted there had been a misunderstanding and urged him to listen. But instead of responding, he shot the director in the other leg, silencing him with another scream. Cut the useless talk, he ordered coldly. The director, now trembling in pain on the ground, revealed that even if he died, he would come back to life and his wounds would heal quickly. He also mentioned that some of Snow White's subordinates had the same abilities, which shocked him. The director explained that those individuals had risen to the top of Japan's underworld despite being a new force, likely due to that technology. The director continued, saying they had sought to obtain that same technology, which was why they had sent agents after it. When he asked if that was the reason he was sent, the director confirmed it. He explained that instead of gathering useful information, all the previous agents had ended up dead. As a result, the plan was revised, and a more reliable agent was chosen, him. The director went on to say that when Snow White entered Korea, she brought that technology with her, and from now on, even with the most dangerous missions, he wouldn't have to worry about injuries. The director then tried to praise him for his hard work, calling him a hero, but this only enraged him further and he shot the director in the shoulder. The director screamed in pain, asking why he was being shot after revealing everything. He coldly responded, accusing the director of calling him a hero when he was merely planning to use him as a test subject. He demanded to know if the director even understood who that woman was. He continued, stating that if there were continuous casualties, the director should have gathered more information instead of sending agents to their deaths. His colleagues could have been saved, but the director's greed had led to their demise. The director, still gasping for breath, tried to justify his actions, suggesting that his abilities were something extraordinary. He argued that even those Yakuza members were just people, no different from anyone else. The director reminded him that he had said he wouldn't lose to mere people, insisting it was his job to complete the mission. Shouting now, the director claimed that his colleagues had only died because they took on missions with a death wish. He He then angrily asked why he was causing such a fuss when they had even given his colleagues medals posthumously. He kicked the director in the head, ordering him to stay silent. Putting his gun away, he reached under his coat and pulled out a knife, telling the director to feel the pain that the agents had endured. "This night is far from over," he muttered as the director stutteringly begged him to wait. Just as he was about to launch the knife at him, a shot rang out, knocking the knife from his hand. Startled, he turned to see soldiers shouting at him to drop his weapon and surrender immediately. The director, now emboldened, yelled at the soldiers, asking why it had taken them so long to respond after he had called for help. The soldiers ignored him, stepping out of their hiding places and positioning themselves, their guns trained on him. Realizing the danger, he quickly decided to make a run for it. As he sprinted away, the soldiers opened fire, their bullets tearing into him. The director ducked down to avoid the crossfire, and he was hit repeatedly. The soldiers only ceased fire when he lay motionless on the ground, his body drenched in his own blood. The director, feeling victorious, laughed mockingly, shouting at him that he had been acting all high and mighty, and now he had gotten what he deserved. He gloated that they would tie him up for life and extract his blood as they pleased. But as the director realized that he wasn't moving, a hint of fear crept into his voice. He nervously asked if he couldn't resurrect and heal wounds like before. The director shouted at him, taunting him that no matter how powerful he was, or how formidable the Yakuza were, they couldn't stand up to overwhelming firepower. He continued to mock him, laughing as he called out that he had worked hard. But then, someone appeared, hanging upside down from the ceiling, startling the director. The figure called out to the director, who was shocked to see a woman. She asked if the person lying on the ground was Sahyok, leaving the director confused. The woman introduced herself as Ayaka, the squad leader of Unit 7, and revealed that she was part of the Yakuza that the director had just mentioned. Panicked, the director ordered the soldiers to kill her as well. But when they opened fire, Ayaka moved with incredible speed, leaping out of their line of sight and landing behind them in an instant. The soldiers panicked as they realized Ayaka had moved behind them without being noticed. When did she get there? One of them stammered, but before they could react, it was too late. Ayaka began slashing through them with deadly precision, rolling around the group and cutting them down with her knives. The remaining soldiers tried to regroup and fire at her in unison. Calmly, she sipped blood from a tube she carried, then blocked every bullet with nothing but her knife. The soldiers couldn't believe their eyes, a mere knife was deflecting bullets. As she approached the soldier at the front of the formation, she effortlessly slashed him in half. The soldier behind him was horrified as his comrade's head flew in his direction, and just a second later, he too was sliced in half. Desperate, another soldier at the back took careful aim and fired, sure he had her in his sights. Ayaka turned and saw the bullet hurtling toward her, but with a swift motion, she sliced the bullet in half with her knife. The remaining soldiers were stunned, realizing she wasn't just deflecting bullets, she was cutting them down. One soldier, trembling, began to ask what kind of monster she was, but before he could finish, a sword flew through the air, severing his arm. In the same fluid motion, Ayaka stabbed another soldier in the neck with her knife. She then spun around, decapitating the soldier whose arm she had just severed. His head hit the ground with a dull thud as the director watched in utter despair. The director, horrified and hopeless, could only watch as Ayaka slowly approached him. He thought to himself that she was a monster, but before he could even beg for his life, she sliced his head in half. Ayaka then stopped in front of Sahyok, who slowly stood up. She asked him if he was indeed Sahyok. When she mentioned that Anna, Snow White, had requested him, his anger flared. He spat out a curse, calling Anna a whore and telling Ayaka to get lost. Unfazed, Ayaka corrected him, saying, "It's not bring him in, it's bring him to her." He attacked her with his knife, but she swiftly countered with two swords, swinging at him. She remarked that he was quite impressive. He repeatedly blocked her attacks, but then his vision began to blur. He wondered if he had lost too much blood and realized that the longer the fight dragged on, the worse his condition would get. He questioned whether this was the only way, before launching his knife again to block her slashes. She told him that he had held out for a long time, but then she forcefully pushed his knife aside and declared that it was the end. She pierced her sword into his stomach, making him cough up blood. Despite the pain, he grabbed her other arm and, to her surprise, told her that he had her. He then immediately launched his knife at her head. As the sword was about to slice her head off, she gripped her own sword tightly and countered, slicing his body. Both of them then slammed into the ground, with her head severed and his arm cut off, his body slashed. He lay on the ground, staring blankly, and recalled Anna swearing that this time he would definitely cut off her head. He believed he had won. As his mind began to fade, he wondered if he was dying again. But before his eyes could fully close, he heard her voice, complimenting him once more on being quite impressive. To his shock, he saw her holding her own head while standing. His eyes widened as he saw her lift her severed head and place it back on her body. She then reattached it, and the wounds on her body healed seamlessly. She remarked that Anna would find him desirable, which made him curse in frustration as he realized that his body wasn't moving. She aimed her sword at his chest, telling him that he had done well, but when he woke up, he would be in front of Anna. She then stabbed him, thinking that he should be more docile by now. She suddenly realized that her blood supply had been cut off, yet she remained conscious. Knowing time was running out, she understood they needed to return before it was too late. She was about to pull the sword out of his chest when she saw him move. Surprised, she asked if he could still stand. To her shock, he stood up and then launched his fist at her. She easily dodged the punch, telling him that struggling was pointless. With a swift motion, she pulled the sword from his chest, calling him foolish, and then severed the last arm attached to his body. She taunted him, saying that soon all his limbs would be gone. But before she could finish, an unexpected attack struck her in the face, shattering part of her mask. Shocked, she jumped back as he rushed at her to attack again. She was even more surprised to see his hand regenerating at an incredible speed. She dodged his sharp claws, but he still managed to slash her, tearing her clothes in the process. Realizing that he had super speed regeneration, she grew increasingly alarmed. He then bit into her arm, sucking the blood from her body. Panic set in as she slashed at him repeatedly, but he refused to let go, continuing to drain her blood. Each wound she inflicted healed almost instantly. She screamed in pain, feeling her strength draining away, knowing that at this rate, she would lose everything. Desperate, she grabbed her sword and severed her own arm to free herself from his grasp. She landed on the ground, now missing an arm, and stared in horror as he continued gnawing on her dry, severed limb. He finally let go, and she stood there, stunned and horrified, as he growled in anger. She couldn't comprehend what kind of monster he had become. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, hitting him in the head. She quickly turned to her side and began to deflect the barrage of bullets coming her way with her sword. However, one shot struck her shoulder, burning her skin. Alarmed, she wondered what kind of weapon it was. As she looked around, she saw men approaching and surrounding her. A woman stepped forward, addressing the heavens and calling on the Father, declaring that they were sending both her and the creature up to meet him. She was surprised to see them, and the lady quickly ordered the men to shoot. The soldiers aimed their guns and fired, repeatedly hitting both her and Sahyok in the legs. She realized they were intentionally targeting their legs, forcing them both to kneel on the ground. The lady then commanded her men to stop and burn Sahyok. One of the men retrieved a case from his back, pulled out a specialized sniper, and aimed it at Sahyok. He fired multiple rounds, and the small arrows burned his skin. More men then anchored Sahyok in place with more arrows, and released a powerful electric that set Sahyok's body electrified, causing him to scream in agony. Meanwhile, she lay on the floor in panic as the sun began to rise. When the sunlight hit her body, it burned her skin, making her scream in pain. The priestess, standing in front of her to block the sunlight, asked mockingly if it was painful. She added that hellfire would be twice as hot, and mocked her for making such a fuss over it. Enraged, she called the priestess a mere human and warned her not to look down on them. She swung her sword at the priestess, but the priestess blocked her arm with a powerful kick, pinning it to the ground. The sun continued to scorch her hand, and she screamed in pain. The priestess sneered, calling her a half-wit and asking her to repeat what she had just said. The priestess then vowed that she would kill her today and soon, her friends as well. However, the priestess's attention was suddenly drawn away when one of her comrades shouted in alarm. She turned, shocked to see Sahyok still standing. She couldn't understand how he could still be on his feet after the onslaught and why he seemed unaffected by the sunlight. Ayaka noticed that the priestess was distracted and realized this was her chance. She immediately bolted, running as fast as she could. The priestess, surprised, wondered if Ayaka had used the last of her blood to escape. She prepared to chase after her but stopped when she heard her comrade screaming in frustration, shouting, "Why won't that bastard die?" The soldier continued shooting at Sahyok, who was now charging at them. Sahyok was close to grabbing one of the men's heads, but fortunately, the priestess intervened just in time, slicing off his hand. She quickly ordered her men to retreat, to which they immediately responded, "Yes, ma'am." Sahyok growled at the priestess, who observed him with a mix of frustration and caution. "He seems more dangerous than we thought," she muttered. She then swung her sword at him, shouting for him to die. But to her astonishment, he effortlessly blocked her sword with his bare hand. Shocked, she asked, "Are you really that tough?" She watched in astonishment as his hand regenerated, and then he launched his fist at her with incredible speed. As his fist neared her head, she swiftly moved her body to the side, narrowly dodging the blow. Breathing a sigh of relief, she silently thanked her quick reflexes and then activated her power, causing her eyes to glow a bright yellow. She muttered that it was a good thing she hadn't finished off Ayaka earlier. With renewed determination, she launched her fist into his stomach, sending him flying backward with such force that he slammed into the top of the stairs. She calmly walked closer, taunting him by saying that someone like him was bound to stand out, and asked where he had been hiding all this time, wondering why they hadn't seen him until now. As she approached, she noticed him sitting in the fog, but she froze in surprise when she saw him sucking the blood from the director. Confused, she wondered why he would be blood-sucking in the middle of a battle. He released the director's body, now full of energy, and stared at her with wild eyes. Then, he let out a monstrous scream, which made her clench her fist. "This must be the end for you," she declared. She infused her sword with power, positioning her foot as she prepared to strike. She shouted at him to come at her, but to her shock, he suddenly collapsed to the ground, unconscious. She stood there, bewildered, trying to comprehend what had just happened. Later, he heard someone calling him team leader, which stirred him awake. His vision was blurred, but he recognized the voice and saw a familiar figure. His commander asked if he was conscious, to which the priest answered yes on his behalf. He asked who she was, and when he tried to move, he realized he was tied up, making him wonder what was happening. The priestess then spoke to him with a cold tone, telling him to listen carefully. She explained that after considering his actions, they had decided to kill him, referring to him as a vampire. Stunned and confused, he was left in a state of shock, struggling to process what he had just heard. He then asks her what she means by a vampire and tells her not to make him laugh because such things don't exist. But she calmly holds his head, asking if he really believes that. Her touch makes him uneasy and he asks what she's doing. Without a word, she bites her finger, drawing blood in front of him. The sight of it causes his eyes to turn red as an intense thirst overwhelms him. He struggles to free himself, his gaze locked on the blood, desperate to drink it. But just as he's about to give in, he snaps back to reality, horrified by his thoughts. She then asks if he believes her now, but he remains silent, catching his breath, trying to understand what just happened. His commander, who had been observing, says he can't believe it, but it seems to be true. He reveals a video showing him rampaging on the ship, with the bodies exactly as the priestess had described. Confused and disoriented, he wonders if the commander is accusing him of the carnage. The priestess interjects, scolding them for recklessly issuing a mission to eliminate Anna without knowing what she truly is. He asks her how she discovered that Anna is a vampire, something even the National Intelligence Service couldn't uncover. She responds confidently, saying it's their Vatican squad's job to kill vampires. With a smirk, she presses her foot against his chest and tells him that, according to their rules, they should kill him too. However, she offers him a special chance, become her dog. Stunned, he asks what she means by that. She explains that they share a common enemy, so it would be foolish to waste their strength fighting each other. Instead, they should join forces to kill Anna. Meanwhile, in Japan, inside the tallest building, Anna speaks to someone about the cartel being taken over and the mafia being absorbed. She then turns to Ayaka, whose arms have been cut off, leaving only her upper body intact, and coldly asks why no one could catch a single bug. Ayaka, despite her torture, stutters an apology. Anna remarks that she shouldn't have entrusted the task to her and then silently removes her mask, kissing Ayaka to pass her blood. Immediately, Ayaka feels her veins come alive, and her severed limbs and body are miraculously restored. Kneeling naked before Anna, she is given one last chance to bring him to her. Fueled by anger, Ayaka heads out on her mission, unaware that someone is watching her from the rooftop. Meanwhile, on a Korean road, a black car speeds along with him and the priest inside. He recalls the priest giving him a choice: die as a vampire by her hands or become her dog and work together to kill Anna. His commander warns him to be cautious, reminding him that the agent he killed was from the director's faction, leaving them no choice but to target him too. He snaps out of his thoughts when she tells him that his expression gives him away, asking if he finds it hard to believe he's a vampire. He only asks why she brought him here, to which she responds that without her, all the factions would have targeted him, and asks if she's right that in this case, it's better to take revenge together. He asks if she trusts him, and she bluntly replies, of course not, but adds that the enemy of his enemy is his ally, which is enough for now. She then tells him they've arrived and introduces him to the main base of the squad, called Sanctum. He asks if it's just a cathedral, and she confirms, explaining that it appears more natural this way. He stares at Sanctum, surprised when the car continues to move forward. He asks if they're not supposed to stop, but she informs him that it's not their destination. Moreover, since Sanctum is protected by sacred artifacts, he can't enter it. She also tells him that even if he becomes a member of the squad, for now, he's still just prey for Anna. Therefore, she's classified him as a special case and decided to manage him personally. As she steps out of the car, she adds that, in other words, he will have to live with her. This revelation shocks him. They headed to their room while she explained that it was a hotel affiliated with the squad, providing a secure location with no records left behind. As they entered, she sat down on the bed and realized they hadn't even properly introduced themselves. She introduced herself as a member of the Vatican secret squad, Mirror, and he simply gave his name in return. Noticing his curiosity, she told him he probably had many questions and encouraged him to ask anything. He asked her to explain vampires, to which she noted that it seemed he was beginning to accept the reality of his situation. She explained that as long as vampires keep consuming human blood, they are effectively immortal. They possess physical abilities that far surpass those of humans, and some even have unique powers. Most of these vampires are descended from ancient bloodlines, but now Anna is the last remaining one. He began to wonder if he turned into a vampire when he bit Anna's neck. He then asked Mirror how vampires could be killed. She explained that vampires typically burn to death when exposed to sunlight, except for him. This immunity is likely why Anna is targeting him. However, by turning this advantage into an opportunity, they could confront Anna. But for that, he needed to get stronger, and she assured him that she would help. She then asked if he understood why she brought him there. He responded that he understood clearly now that she feared him. This surprised her. He explained that without the constraint of the sun, he could become the worst kind of vampire, which made leaving him unchecked dangerous. Yet, killing him would mean losing valuable potential. Thus, using the public enemy as a pretext, they could monitor him and eliminate him if deemed dangerous. In any case, they had nothing to lose. She smiled at his insight, acknowledging that he wasn't the top agent for nothing. She added that in the end, he was still a vampire, and this was all just part of his role as a squad member. Then, she grabbed her sword, reminding him that their goal was to kill Anna and that they intended to make him stronger for that purpose. If he had any complaints, he was free to speak up at any time. He calmly tells her that he has already died several times, and as long as he can kill Anna, nothing else matters to him. However, he makes it clear that he has no intention of submitting easily. This makes her think that he's revealed his true intentions without holding back, yet he's still willing to follow her lead. She wonders if his goal is solely revenge. She smiles, liking his boldness, and thinks it will be enjoyable to tame him. She then tells him that now that the introductions are over, it's time to eat. Tilting her head, she instructs him to bite her neck. He's taken aback and asks why she would suddenly say that and what she means by it. She explains that, like it or not, he is a vampire now. Normally, a lack of blood would paralyze him, but he seems to crave blood in a unique way. She adds that he wouldn't want to harm innocent people, so this is the best solution. He stands up and looks at her neck. She urges him to hurry up and drink her blood, saying her neck is cramping. Reluctantly, he approaches her and bites her neck. As he drinks Mira's blood, he feels pressure building inside him, the blood fueling his strength. But he doesn't stop, he wants more and more. Mira, thinking to herself, decides to let him drink his fill, but then he suddenly hears Anna's mocking laughter in his mind, calling him interesting. This snaps him out of it, and he pushes Mira away, causing her to fall back onto the bed. He wonders if this insatiable thirst is the vampire's instinct. Mira then sits up and tells him that he'll be busy starting tomorrow, so it's best to get some sleep. She lies down, warning him that if he slacks off, she'll kill him. He stares at her in silence, wondering if he'll have to drink blood like this every day. His hand trembles, but he forces himself to stop, reminding himself that everything is for revenge. Even if his body has become that of a vampire, his heart remains unchanged. He vows to his fallen brothers that he will send Anna to hell. After cleaning himself up, he adjusts the blanket and lies down next to Mira to sleep. He peacefully closes his eyes, unaware that Mira is still awake beside him. She composes herself, feeling a bit shy, and wonders why he chose to lie next to her. Well guys, that's the end of the video. If you like this video, comment part 2 in the comments section. Also subscribe to the channel, hit the bell and like the video. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.